The public has a long-held fascination with detectives. Detectives see a side of life the average person is never exposed to. In this podcast series, I Catch Killers with Gary Jubilant, I will be interviewing real detectives, taking the audience into their world, a world that is rarely seen by the public. I spent 34 years as a cop. For 25 of those years I was catching killers. That's what I did for a living. I was a homicide detective. I'm no longer interviewing bad guys, instead I'm interviewing detectives. The guests I've selected are the cops I consider real detectives. Their business was catching bad guys, and they were prepared to go into a world where pressure, risk and sacrifice was the norm. These are their stories. Today's guest on I Catch Killers spent 50 years as a New South Wales police officer. Yes, you heard me right, 50 years. He joined the cops in 1968 and retired in 2018. 44 of those years were spent working in the very demanding and ever-changing field of forensic investigation. Retired Senior Sergeant Steve Horn was a designated detective and crime scene officer. I believe Steve would be the longest-serving crime scene officer in the country, if not the world. I challenge anyone to prove that statement wrong. Besides being one of Australia's most experienced forensic investigators, he is also the most humble man you will ever meet. The most acknowledgement you will get out of Steve if someone gives him a compliment is, "I was just doing my job." What a job he has done. I'm fascinated by Steve's stories and experiences. The listener today will be in for a real treat. What it was like policing King's Cross during the Vietnam War, when the American servicemen would come here for R&R. Steve's own experience of being conscripted into the army through the ballot system imposed during the Vietnam War. His time as a detective in the 21 Division, which was used as the sharp end of policing in the 70s. His work as a crime scene investigator during the Granville train disaster, in which 83 people were killed. Fascinating stories around the many and varied crimes he has attended throughout his career. Steve will also take us on a fascinating journey investigating World War II war crimes, excavating mass graves in Russia. Let's welcome Steve Horn. Steve Horn, how are you?
Fine, Gary. How are you?
Very good, very good.
I'd still like to call you sir.
You don't have to call me sir. Trust me, I should be calling you sir. Here we are at the Keg and Brew and recording another episode of Real Detectives, and today we're very fortunate to have Steve Horn. I will talk briefly about Steve Horn, but first of all, a few housekeeping rules. Steve, do you agree that you've given me permission to record this conversation?
Yes.
Why are you laughing? Oh, okay. It's how
I understand.
The public are very much aware of my recording habits, but I just need to clarify that.
I trust you, Gary.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Steve, you joined the police in 1968?
Yes, I did.
And retired in 2018?
Yes.
That's 50 years in the police.
Yes.
Are you the longest serving police officer in the history of the world?
No, I don't think so.
You'd have to be close to it.
No.
Just before we start, I'd like to just reflect on your retirement, and I was very fortunate to be asked to speak at your retirement on your behalf, and I think I used the word legend to describe you when I was speaking about you, because the way that you have conducted your career, you just typify what a police officer should be, and a detective, be it a crime scene officer, and the work and the passion that you had for your job. So I just cheers to you on that one, Steve. I was humbled by being asked to speak at your retirement, and the fact that I got to work with you. The other thing that I'd just like to point out before we get to know who the real Steve Horn is the fact that even after 50 years in the cops, my last memory of you on a site at the murder scene was tracking around the bush in the national park looking for Matthew Levison's body. And it wasn't someone that sits on their laurels and sits back. You're actually on the hoe digging while all the machines were around there, and I think that's testament to the type of person you were. So,
well, Gary, I had a job. I was there to go as a consultant, and I got down and got dirty, and that's what I've done all my police career, is get down and get dirty and get into it. And as you know, many of the cases are homicides.
Yeah.
And it's basically forensics who have to talk for the body.
Yeah. Well, it's the fact that and your humility's shining through now, because you actually came down on your days off as well and helped out there, and I reached out to you because we're having trouble finding the body and I wanted to cash in on your expertise. But anyway, that's let's start the journey. So
Just a different technique being used for that
Yeah.
scene.
Well, it worked. We got the body back, and we all know how much that meant to the families.
Yes.
1968. Why did you join the police?
Well, I wasn't actually looking at joining the police. I wanted to join the Air Force.
Yeah.
Because I was in the Air Force cadets at high school and became cadet under officer.
Right.
So I was pretty keen on flying, and I wanted to try and become a pilot or
Yes.
a navigator or something like that. And the Vietnam War was on at the time.
Yes.
And I just had a feeling that, going to the military, whether it be Army or Navy or Air Force, and but the problem was my parents didn't have enough money
Right.
to pay if you failed a course or you left a course. They had to have, I was told later on, you had to have like $10,000. Well, that's true or not, I
Yeah.
don't know.
A lot of
But,
money in those days.
Anyway, a friend of my father's was a detective, and went and saw him and spoke to him, and he suggested, well, why not join the police? So I thought about it, and I hadn't long left high school, so and I couldn't join until I was 19. So I applied and went into class, I think it was in April 1968.
Changed world from now to then. That would have been at the Redfern Academy.
It was the Redfern Academy. I think we did 6 weeks to start off with, then went out as a probationary constable I went to Marylands and Fairfield.
Yes.
And then back in at the end of 10 months for another 6 weeks, and then come out as a constable. But I got called up for national service.
Right.
So I only did about 14, 15 months as a police officer.
Yeah.
And I got called up for national service.
And how did that fit in? So you left the police then?
Yeah, I was like a special. They gave like 2 years special leave.
Right.
And so I was on special leave. They actually made up the differences in the pay.
Yeah.
And got through the medicals and that, and went and did initial training at Singleton.
Right.
And core training at Singleton, and then I ended up at Holsworthy in the 2nd Cavalry Regiment.
Right.
Became a crew commander of a personnel carrier.
With your moustache, I can imagine.
No, I didn't have a moustache.
Oh, you didn't. I'm looking at the moustache now. I can
No
imagine.
moustache.
Yeah.
No, and it was
So that was all part of the conscription. That was
conscription.
the ballot.
Yeah, that was 2 years,
Yeah.
and
What did you feel like when that came out?
I didn't really worry me.
Yeah.
I thought, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. I think in the street where I lived, there was only 3 of us that actually got their numbers pulled out, and it's a bit different. You have a lot of new people to work with and develop skills with, how to live, how to survive, how to kill.
Yeah.
And that's what the training was.
Right.
And it was a little bit different in the armoured corps.
Yeah.
Because you didn't have to walk.
Right.
You could drive.
Yeah. Okay.
You could carry extra food and more food when you're on exercise and stuff like that. So it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
And, as I said, I eventually became a crew commander of a personnel carrier.
So 2 years you spent?
2 years, I was the last of the 2 year lot.
Yeah, yeah.
Because Gough Whitlam became Prime Minister.
Right, yeah.
Stopped national service and started pulling the troops out of Vietnam.
Yep.
So you'd say I was lucky.
Yeah.
I was on the verge of going to jungle training
Right.
up in Queensland, and would have gone overseas.
Yeah, yeah.
For, several months or whatever, but
Yeah.
that didn't happen. So when I was finishing up, I was asked by my commanding officer at the 2nd Cavalry Regiment if I wanted to stay in the army as a permanent, and he wanted to send me to Skyville, which is officers training in Victoria.
Yes.
And I thought about it hard and I thought, do I want to be in the army or want to be in the police? And I went back to the police.
It would have been a hard decision, but I would imagine, because you would have felt comfortable in the army after 2 years.
I did, but it really wasn't the career I was sort of looking for.
Yeah.
I felt in the police I could do a lot more for the community and things like that. that's the sort of person I am.
Yeah. And so when you came back to the police, so you've had your 2 years military service?
Yes, I went back to Fairfield.
And they keep your spot for you?
Kept the spot for me, yeah. I even did my Constable First Class exam. I went to court while I was doing national service. So.
Oh, complicated life.
So, anyway.
Soldier, policeman?
So I went back to Fairfield in uniform and that, and then I went on the A list.
Yep.
And worked out of Fairfield plain clothes for a while, went through the
And just so the
bull ring.
listeners understand the A-list and the bull ring, the A-list is what we term when someone decides to go from uniform into plain clothes. You're not a detective, you're called an A-lister.
A-lister.
I don't know what that represents, A-lister, but that's what they call
That's
it.
what they call it.
I certainly know what the bull ring was, because
Yes.
that's where you had to go sit in the room with some grumpy, cranky-looking detective
Detective
sergeants, and they grew you on questions and see
The scenarios.
how you handled pressure.
Yeah.
How was your bull ring? I would imagine it would be fairly rough and ready in those days.
Oh, it wasn't too bad.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
it was it's actually quite good.
Yeah.
And then after a while at Fairfield, I went to 21 Division.
Right.
And so I was there for nearly 12 months, mainly worked up King's Cross.
So how would you, and I'm very much aware of 21 Division, but you worked at, how would you describe 21 Division?
Oh, it was very different.
That's
Extremely different. You work with a lot of senior sergeants there.
Yep.
Mainly gambling and betting.
Yep.
Prostitution.
Yep.
And if there was an issue going on, well, back then we had the surfies and the rockers.
Yeah.
And they were always meeting up and having little fights and brawls. And
Yeah.
if there was information or that was coming through that something has happened, we'd go out
Would
and...
it be fair to say the 21 Division was the sharp end of the policing? If there was a problem area, the 21 Division was sent in?
It could on many occasions.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I remember we went to Lady Jane Beach
Yeah.
on the first arrest of nude bathers on the beach back there.
Moral police, were you?
And I think I ended up arresting about 5 people and went to Waverley Court over about 2 years for them.
the type of experiences you get as a police officer.
Oh, yes.
Amazing.
You can imagine what people
Yeah.
are like. You know, you go down the beach and there's,
Yeah,
people
yeah.
lying around naked
So
or walking
what
naked.
years are we talking now? Is this early?
1973.
Yeah, you have
21
you
Division.
have seen some changes, haven't you? Like from
Yeah.
then to the police force would have been a rough and ready place. The military must have helped you, but with the discipline and the...
Well, it did help me a lot because they used to call me the fuzz.
Yeah.
And quite often I got called upon to go and speak to soldiers
Yep.
that are having difficulties.
Right.
Some didn't like national service and they wanted to
Yeah.
get out. I've seen them chop a finger off
Yeah,
so
yeah,
they couldn't pull the trigger.
yeah, yeah.
Put them in hospital, bring them back and teach them to shoot left-handed if they're right-handed.
Yeah,
Things
yeah.
like that. Well, one young fella didn't eat for 5 weeks. Didn't
Yeah,
get a
I
meal.
just you raise an interesting point and deviating a little bit, but national service, like you accepted that your number came up, but yeah, there must have been some people that just you had the fit for the army, but there must have been some people that just turned their life upside down.
They did. They just didn't want to be there at all.
Yeah.
You know, I remember being on parade a couple of times, and some of the soldiers would loosen all the screws on their weapons, so
Yeah.
that when you present arms, it'd all fall apart on the parade ground.
Right,
And,
right.
You know, just
There was big
different things.
consequences too in those days because the likelihood were you were going to get deployed to a war zone. And,
Oh,
yeah.
exactly right.
Yeah,
Conscientious objectives and,
Yeah,
and stuff
yeah.
like that, and they still
Yeah.
got called up.
And with the 21 Division, and I'm not quite sure of the times, it might have been a little bit earlier, but with the American Armed Forces coming over the King's Cross, were you policing around that time?
Yes.
That would have been
Yeah.
interesting.
They were there. They
Yeah.
were there around that time. But, you know, as I said, Australians got pulled out of Vietnam
Yeah,
much earlier.
yeah, yeah,
But there was still a lot, and that's why there was a lot of prostitution
yeah.
going on
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
cross during the Vietnam War.
And it would have been hard policing people on R&R coming from a war zone,
Oh.
letting their hair down. So,
Oh yes,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know, look, if you treat a human person like a human person,
yeah,
it's much better. You get on better with them. They'll talk to you. They'll listen to you.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, working with the prostitutes up King's Cross.
yeah, yeah.
You know, they're there making money, but
Yeah.
if you treat them like a human being, not only would you get on well with them, like some some would run and hide from
Yeah.
some 21 Division
Yeah,
officers.
yeah.
And things like that. But I remember I was chasing an offender who stabbed one of the prostitutes one night, and I was run down the back streets of King Cross, and I lost my notebook and something else fell out of my pocket.
Yeah.
There was a group of girls following me.
Yeah.
And I actually grabbed him and had a bit of a wrestle with him on a footpath, and people thought I was trying to assault him. But they all came to my rescue and help and stuff like that. So
I think just in that little thing you've said there is a lot to be learnt for police about having empathy for people and understanding people. Like, don't judge, you're just a prostitute. You treat them as humans, or any person, and it carries a long way, doesn't it?
It does. And, you know, back then they were there to make money.
Yeah.
And some of them were quite wealthy.
Yeah,
And they had a number of houses and different businesses and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And once the war was finished and the Americans was gone, well, that was it. They finished. They didn't stay in it.
Yeah. Well, it would have been it's an interesting time in Sydney's history, and you were right in the forefront of it. It would have been an interesting time.
Yeah.
I'm sure you got 1,000 stories.
Oh, yes. 1,000 stories to say, yeah. But, so while I was in 21 Division, I really thought about, well, is this what I want to do in the police?
Yep.
And I had some skills. I was a bit of an artist. And I did industrial arts at high school, which was drawing plans and things like that. And I thought, I might have a go at the scientific section, as it was known back then. So I applied for it and went into the scientific section in, I think it was about November 1974.
74? Okay. And where was that based at?
That was at the old CIB, the old hack factory.
I remember the hack factory, but that would have been a real fledgling new area of policing, crime scene.
Well, it'd been around for a while,
but
it was an area that was, I remember people going out to up the mountains and taking their gear on a motorbike and sidecar, in the early days and things like that. And, they could be travelling all around the place.
So what was your role as I'll probably keep falling back in the crime scene officer, but I'm sure you weren't called a crime scene officer back then. What were you
Scientific.
called? Scientific officer. What was the role of a scientific officer in 1974?
Well, we had a fingerprint section, and they were mainly doing fingerprints. We had ballistics, so they were mainly doing all the ballistics work.
Yep.
And we had, scientific officers who did the crime scenes.
Right.
And stuff like that.
So that's...
Very similar to what's still around today.
So that's going to a crime scene, so the public understand that it's an area that we're both comfortable with, a murder scene.
Yes.
So someone's been murdered.
Yeah.
Local police turn up, they call out the detectives, and the crime scene police are turned out. What's your role there?
Well, as a new member of the scientific section, you generally went with a senior person or a sergeant to run through and basically go through the crime scene and learn your skills in the field and carry out examinations, collect exhibits, photography, take measurements, draw sketches.
Right.
It's very similar to what goes on today, but nowadays there's a lot of technology that does some of those.
Things it was very very hands-on in those days.
Oh yeah, you're there. You could be there at a murder scene for hours and hours and hours and hours. Just collecting exhibits, looking for exhibits, packaging them, labelling them. No DNA back then. All black and white photography, which you took back to the office and processed yourself.
And why was it black and white? Was there a reason for black and white?
Well, we hadn't really got into colour.
Right.
And a little while later we went to colour, and we could only produce certain colour photographs, particularly a homicide, because they were too horrific for the court and for juries to see and things like that. If we had a photograph of the body, we weren't allowed to produce any close-ups of the body. There had to be some distance.
Okay.
But after years, that all changed, and now it's all colour and digital photography.
Yeah.
Like my first camera was a Linoff.
Right.
Which had big long bellows on it, quite heavy, and
it's not one of those things where you got the
no, but an old Linoff, and you had the negatives were 5x4 negatives.
I remember at the Chatswood crime scene with Dave Forbes and the crew there, and they were always developing their own photos.
That's right.
in the lab there.
Yeah.
And that's what you would do? Take the photos and then...
Take the photos, take them back, process your negatives.
Yeah.
And then, if it was a homicide, you'd have to provide 3 copies
Yeah.
of each photograph. So you'd have 3 enlargers going at one time in your dark room and, trying to get through it all. Could have 100, 150 photographs to print.
And what type of things were you looking for in a crime scene back then? Like DNA, I think everyone understands.
Well,
DNA now. What were
no
the things?
DNA back then.
No.
Blood,
Yep.
hairs, fibre,
Yep.
semen,
Yep.
weapons, shoe prints,
Right.
anything of that particular nature.
Yeah.
But no DNA at all.
Is
back
there,
then.
and it's going back a long time, but is there a crime scene that you remember, or your first homicide crime scene that you went to, or one that you were in charge for the first time?
Oh, I can't remember being a homicide. I remember a sexual assault.
Yeah.
And my first big case, sexual assault at Balmain of a university student who was working as a barmaid in a hotel. She was grabbed by 6 males and kept at the premises for quite some hours, all sexually assaulted her. And I remember they all got arrested,
Yeah.
went to trial, so I had to give all the evidence
Yeah.
for that. And they got 15 to 20 years,
Yeah. Yeah. That would have been a horrific
That was
situation.
one of the first ones that I remember. As for a homicide, I know there was a...
And part of your role with a crime of that nature too, that you would have to be getting photographs of the victim and the injuries and
Yes.
that type of thing as well. So
That's right.
that would be fairly confronting.
Yeah, particularly for females and that, because most of the officers, scientific officers back then were male.
Yeah.
So you generally had to have a female police officer with you if there was some
Yeah.
intimate part that had to be photographed.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But, I do remember one of my first murders was a little boy was murdered at Glebe,
Right.
near the Howell Park
Yep.
racetrack there, and he was found in amongst some vegetation at the back of the track there.
Yeah.
And, we had to cut all the vegetation down and look at it and things like that. Collect any exhibits we could, which was
Yeah.
quite minimal being an outdoor scene.
Yeah.
And but the offender for that was later arrested, and I think they got him by using we had a identikit and Penry systems back then.
Right. Yeah.
And so me with some artist skills, I become
You
one
are
of
full of surprises, Steve.
I become-
Soldier, artist. What else have you done?
one of the Penry and artist operators.
Yeah.
The other officer was mainly Sergeant Roger Johnson.
So when we're talking to Penry, this is you having someone describe to you an offender or whatever, and you're drawing up the image.
Well, sit down with the victim. Now, the Penry system actually consisted of a catalogue, and it had various hairstyles,
Yes.
eyes, nose, mouth, chins, and the witness would go through the book or the catalogue and pick out items they thought were similar to the person. Now, on a lot of occasions, it was very difficult, particularly for a sexual assault victim.
Yeah.
To put them back in that scene at that time. What did they actually see? How much did they see? All the stress and the pressure they're under at the time, So sometimes you had to use your own initiatives and skills and actually put a basic face together on what they were saying, and then actually build it up over a period of a couple of hours till you got something very close, because it's only going to be a representation.
Yes.
It's not going to be an exact likeness
Yeah.
of that person. So I travelled all around New South Wales for different cases, doing Penrys, the Down Barker murders.
Because there wasn't, there wasn't many that had those skills.
No, there was
you
basically
were-
only 2 of us
Yeah,
doing the lot. As well as doing the Penrys, I also did sketches of stolen jewellery.
Right.
From information provided by
Where people haven't
victims.
got photographs of them.
no photographs of them, and like sometimes it's very difficult because women, I'm not being sexist or anything, but they wear jewellery a lot.
Yes.
But when you ask them to actually sit down and describe the setting, the cut of the stone, the size of the band, sometimes they can't provide you that information. So I also travel around the state doing sketches of stolen jewellery for special circulars and other items that need to be drawn up for a while.
So at what stage, you've gone 1974, gone into crime scene.
Yes.
What stage did you, what stage did you think this is a career path I want to follow? Was it
I
an
believe.
instant fit?
Yes. Yes, I enjoyed the work. I enjoyed the type of work.
Yep.
I enjoyed using skills that I had and could develop further. I went to East Sydney Tech for 2 years and did an art course there.
Right.
I went to Randwick Tech and did a jewellery design course there.
Right.
Also went to Ultimo and did a drafting course there, but I already had skills from school, so it was just a bit of extra work
There's
there.
a broad range of skills, and you're a photographer.
And photography,
yeah,
yes, and you develop a lot of skills over a period of time by actually going out into the field.
Yeah.
Not every crime scene is the same,
Yes.
and you have to step back and take your time and look at it, and then go in and gradually go through your crime scene.
Yeah.
You know, the main important thing to the crime scene is the entries in and out of the premises, particularly if it's inside a house. How many people have been in there before you?
Yeah.
You've got to close that down and get it examined and fingerprinted before it gets destroyed too much.
All that practice in the field and that working in the field, I won't say an instinct, but you're building up your body of knowledge every time, aren't you?
Oh.
So you go to a crime scene, you've seen something similar, not exact, and you build on that.
Exactly right. And it just builds up over a period of time. The more you do, the more you become competent in it.
Yeah.
You know, and you're going from suicides to arson investigation to motor vehicle collisions back then. All sorts.
I forgot that you had to do the motor accidents as well.
Everything.
Yeah, it would have been busy.
Everything
a
except
busy time.
Everything except ballistics, because we had our ballistics that did mainly the shootings.
Back in those days, the scientific officers, you also had to do the detectives course as well.
Yes, did the detectives course.
Yep.
And so I did the detectives course.
Yep.
I think it was 1977 or 78. I can't remember. So that was 3 months full-time course.
Yeah.
I found it quite difficult not being an investigator.
It would have been.
I remember Charles Xavier Bloggs
Yeah.
being our offender in a lot of these scenarios, and
Yeah.
interview techniques, learning about interviews, doing statements, victim statements, things like that. So there was a lot to learn.
Yeah.
Plus, you had to be fit.
Yeah.
You had PE.
Yeah.
You had to go around Centennial Park nearly every day.
Yeah.
Come back. Some people took shortcuts, but being police, you know what they're like.
Yeah, catch a taxi.
But yes, I did the detectives course, and
I think that's a good thing, and I know we don't do it now, but I really think that you getting skilled up on being a detective helps you as a crime scene officer, because you know what the detectives
exactly
are looking for.
right.
Yeah.
They know what they want. You know what you can provide them. And being able to go on that course, you develop your certain skills and your knowledge of a detective, and working together, it becomes much easier.
I think in current times there's almost a disconnect. You've got the detectives and you've got the crime scene, and never the two shall meet.
I don't think there's any, as we call them, forensic investigators these days that do have the detective's background.
No, there's not.
And lucky enough, you can still keep your designation.
Yeah.
You don't get paid for it, though, because you get your scientific allowance, so you can't get both. But, no...
It helps giving evidence, because I think the scientific officers, crime scene officers, the amount of time you spend in the witness box too.
Exactly right.
A lot of pressure.
Back in those early days, you were even going to the coroner's court all the time and giving evidence. It's very rare that you go to a coroner's court these days to give evidence, and it's mainly at the trials. Even at other cases, you might not give evidence.
Now, there was... so you've done your designation for detectives.
Yes.
What year was that?
Oh, I'm not too sure if it was 77 or 78, something like that.
You're allowed to forget a couple of years when you spent 50 years. We'll give you a bit of latitude there.
To remember. And then we had the biggest job there we had was Granville train disaster.
Now, for those that don't understand Granville, the train disaster, I do remember it. I remember when it broke on the news. Was it 77?
Yeah, 18th of January.
Yeah,
1977.
I remember I was on school holidays and it broke the news, and it's where the train that collided into the bridge at Granville.
And the bridge clapped on.
And how many people were killed?
I think it was 83.
Yeah,
all up.
It was horrific. What was your role?
I was working out of Campsie.
Yep.
Scientific office then, and so we went across to provide support and assistance to do DVI.
And what do you mean by DVI?
Disaster victim identification.
Okay.
That's removing the deceased from the train, taking them up to a temporary morgue that was set up, and with DVI we have various forms that have to be completed in relation to descriptions of the body, clothing, jewellery, scars, tattoos, things like that.
And that's how the victims are identified.
That's identified, and when the body goes to the morgue, it's done again there during the post-mortem, and then those forms are matched up to verify that the person that we've nominated is exactly that person.
Yeah.
But with Granville, I think we got there about 10:30 or 11 o'clock in the morning.
Yes.
It was quite hectic.
Oh, okay.
There was
chaos.
Wouldn't say there was chaos.
Yeah.
A lot of people coming in and wanted to help and get in. Back then, we just, as scientific officers, wore dark blue overalls.
Yes.
And a number of occasions I got asked, "Who are you? What are you doing?" Because we didn't have any on it like we have now, police or
no insignias on.
Yeah. So with the concrete slab falling onto the train carriages, they actually had to cut the slabs up to pieces and lift them up with a crane before we could go down, photograph the body in situ, and put it on a stretcher and take it up to the temporary morgue. More photographs, more examinations.
Now, I'm sitting here with a sort of stunned look on my face, but I'm just trying to even comprehend what you've seen when you've gone down there, and with the concrete, tons and tons of concrete that just crushed the carriage, the full carriage, and the what you would have seen down there. How did it affect you all?
Oh, it didn't affect me at all. You've got a job to do. If it starts affecting you, you can't do your job. You can't do it properly, you can't do it thoroughly, you can't do it professionally. So, you get in and do the job. It took time to do, to cut through the concrete and lift it up. So it wasn't a continuous thing. We had breaks where we were waiting for the next slab to come up. And so we worked that whole day, all through the night, and all through the next day.
So virtually 2 days straight. Worked on it,
Yes.
and with it, I know when it occurred, there was also some people, they were trying to recover people that hadn't died, and the chaos that was going on with that, the recovery missions there, and that must have been traumatic for everyone around.
Oh, that's true. Well, I remember one of our scientific officers from Parramatta was one of the first at the scene. And he was actually down there under the wreckage. I think he was talking to a female. She was still conscious and able to talk, and once that concrete was lifted and the roof, she had that crust syndrome. She actually passed away.
Once, and that in the limit, I understand that when there's been a pressure situation like that and the load's taken off, that the people just basically bleed out. Go in the shock. So that's a significant event and crime scene. And after that, how did you feel after it? Like, I'm just trying to get a sense of after 2 days of that, literally recovering bodies. You go home. Is it hard to just switch off?
Oh, I could switch off. Don't take it home. Don't take it home. Obviously, your wife's going to ask you a bit about it. You don't give her the full details. And sit down and relax, because being in scientific section, you can do so many jobs one day, but you don't know what's going to happen that night or the next day.
Right, so you do need to recharge.
So you need to recharge. And,
Yeah.
and back in those early days as a scientific officer, you used to work 10 days straight. And 7 of those days you'd be on call. So you'd work your day shift, and once you finish your shift, you went home with a vehicle and all your equipment, and you're on call. So if something happened, you got called out to it. So a lot of the time you're out by yourself, working long hours, all different hours. You know, you go out and do jobs, come back home, have an hour's sleep, and you're getting called out again and things like that. So there's a lot of pressure and issues and stress. And you know, down the track, years later, a lot of scientific officers and forensics officers go off post-mortem stress.
Yeah, well, it's built up. I like what you said, because that's how I got through my career. When you go to horrific scenes or whatever, that you're there to do a job.
Yep.
So you don't put life into the body. You don't think outside the square of what you're meant to be doing, what your role is there. And I think that's a safeguard that carried me through. And I can understand with the magnitude of what you're confronted with the Granville disaster, you would have had to deal with that as well. On call, since I've been out of the police, I didn't realise how much on-call impacted on you, and how nice it is just to go to sleep without worrying about the phone ringing. Crime scene, I always reckon there was only one job tougher than to be called out as a homicide detective. It was to be called out as a crime scene officer when you're there, standing around the crime scene, 2 o'clock in the morning, freezing cold, and we got work to do, but eventually we go back to the station or go chase the crooks, and you guys, the crime scene officers or scientific officers, are left at the scene. It's a hard job.
It is.
Yeah,
it is. But you know, like today, they'll have a team.
Yeah,
the forensic officers go there. They don't work call. They work 12-hour shifts now, I believe. So
you were born in the wrong time, Steve.
I don't think so.
No, I think the respect that the scientific officers and crime scene officers were given by the detectives was a reflection of the professionalism of your people.
And not only that, working out in the suburb, you build up a far better rapport with your local detectives and investigators and stuff like that. You know, just working together all the time.
Yeah.
So it made things a little bit easier.
There's a couple of other matters that you've been involved in that were significant and sort of in the psyche of the state. Was the bus crashes at Grafton and Kempsey?
Clybucker.
Yeah.
Bus crash.
Yeah. When was that? What year was that? Do you remember?
I can't remember. Remember what I was in. But I didn't actually go to the scene.
Yeah.
I was at Glebe Morgue.
Yeah.
And all the bodies came to I think there was 30 odd bodies come to Glebe Morgue.
Now, for those that don't remember those accidents, I think it was 21 people killed on two
buses head-on collision.
And then there was another one within 6 months or the same year where 39 people were killed. And it was just horrific. Yeah,
that was Clybucker, the one I was involved with. And again, it was DVI, Disaster Victim Identification, where the bodies went to Glebe Morgue. Yeah. So we had a couple of teams there doing the bodies with the pathologists there.
Right.
Completing our forms for identification and stuff like that, and looking for causes of death and photographing.
And yeah, when you talk about it, and it's obviously something that you're accustomed to and that, but I think people fully need to understand what we're talking about there, that these bodies get taken to the morgue and then you've got to examine the bodies and get what you need to identify the bodies.
Exactly right.
It's not easy work.
No, it's not easy work, but you know, a lot of people don't like going to the morgue.
Yeah.
We've had crime scene people that, forensic people that didn't like to touch bodies or handle bodies.
Probably in the wrong business.
And exactly right. They might be there 6 months and just couldn't cope with it.
Yeah.
You know, I think you have to have certain conditions where you can put certain things aside and go and do your job. You know, like standing around at a morgue with multiple post-mortems being done, you know, and every table covered with the body. Yeah. You know, and seeing what goes on.
Yeah, it's confronting and I can see how if you've just got the wrong mindset for her that could muck you up. But you obviously, like the how long were you in the crime scene? 44 years. You obviously had the personality traits that could survive that type of work. So it's with the crime scene, developments in crime scene. What are some of the developments that you've seen in your career? And I'll just jump in here for a sec. At your send-off, and it was being bandied about, and I think they're possibly right that you could be the longest-serving crime scene officer in the Western world.
Oh, I don't know about the Western world, but...
Well, probably the whole world. I don't know anyone that would be...
I don't know.
Pretty rare.
Look at things like that.
You could almost claim it. I don't think anyone could rebut it.
Nah, well, maybe.
44 years, it's a long time.
But, I enjoyed my career. I enjoyed the work. I enjoyed, over a period of times, training younger people.
Yeah.
I remember you and I with the homicide course.
Yes,
for quite a number of years.
That's right. You'd set up the crime
scenes and do presentations.
Yeah.
And just taking young staff out into the field and showing them how to do a job.
Yeah.
And whereas, these days, I think because they have a team of people that can go to a homicide, the work is spread around a lot more. I can't remember when exactly it happened, but I was on call for a week and I had 5 murders that week by myself.
Yeah.
And I earned so much overtime. I didn't get paid much at all because it all got taxed at a much higher rate. I started on the Monday with a suspicious death, walked out of the mall later that night to a hotel fire up at King's Cross with a body in it.
Yeah.
I think the 2 top floor levels of the hotel had been burnt, so it was a very dangerous condition. Had a trial on at the same time. A baby came from the country, suspicious death, shaken baby syndrome, so I had that. An old gentleman, assaulted and robbed, passed away. And then on the Saturday, I had a murder at Alexandria, where a fellow murdered his girlfriend, bashed her with a wooden club and a soda siphon. Then went and got the Matic and killed her with that, disposed of some of his clothing and the weapons, poured lighter fluid over and tried to set fire onto her. But...
So that's a week now. If someone, I know it's true, but if you're telling someone, you'd be going, you're making that up. Like, could you imagine people going, what did you do this week? And you explain that, like 5 murders. And 5 murders is not just going there, taking a photo and walking away. That's examining the crime scene. It's doing all the follow-up and logging the exhibits that you've seized and then moving on to the next one.
And then on the Sunday, I had a large arson to go into those streets.
It's always good to finish with a fire.
So,
So
I did have some help with the fire at King's Cross.
But so you're doing something because you're passionate about it. Because no one would do that unless you had a real passion for the work that you did, and that was your vocation.
Yeah. And with the murder on the weekend, I went and examined the suspect at Redfern Police Station. Yeah. And he disposed of certain items and clothing and things like that. But he didn't change his boots. Yeah. And he had blood stains on it, which were from cast off. Yeah. When he's hitting her.
Yeah.
And,
And those little things are the gotcha moments. As a detective, I'm sitting there, we let you go in and examine, and you come out with that, and it's just gold for us. We've just solved the crime.
And back then, I wasn't an expert in blood spat interpretation or anything like that. It was just looking at it, examining it, and giving that evidence in court. Yeah. And, really a lot of times it's up to the court to say yes or no whether you can give that evidence, depending on your experience or your expertise. I've never classed myself as being expert in anything. Yeah. It can create problems. Yeah. And, no, I'll allow the court, you've been around long enough, you can say, give that evidence.
Well, it's the crime scene evidence, because we rely so heavily on it, and if we haven't got the confession, invariably the evidence that we're taking someone to court is based on the crime scene. So the highly paid defence barristers are going to attack everything
Oh,
you do.
they did.
And they would try and just discredit you, humiliate you,
Yep.
and make you the laughing stock of the jury.
Oh, they used
that
to.
seemed to be their
Yeah.
role. I always felt that I had pressure going in as the homicide detective in the witness box, but I felt the pressure was more on the crime scene because I've seen a lot of you guys in there giving evidence, and you've got some very smart barristers that have clearly employed some scientific expert
Yes.
to discredit your findings
Yes,
and that.
exactly
Have you
right.
had some difficult court matters in your time?
Oh, I wouldn't say extremely difficult because, if I don't know
But Steve, you just said your week wasn't that busy when you had
Oh.
5 murders. So, well,
Look, if a question came to me and I didn't know the answer, I would not give an answer, not pretend to give an answer, or
That's
not
good
say
advice.
that I know
Yeah.
something about it.
Yeah.
I would say, no, you have to go to this expert or that
yeah,
expert.
yeah.
If something came up during the examination or the investigation, I didn't know something, I would try and find something about it.
Yes.
I would go and speak to the experts that knew about it.
Yeah.
Try and get them involved. Because once you start providing information in court,
Yeah.
which you know very little about,
Yeah.
as you said,
Yeah.
it can bring you down.
Yeah. Well,
And they
that's-
discredit you,
Yeah.
and they'll discredit all the other evidence you've given.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you've made a mistake here, where else did you make a mistake?
That's good advice, and good advice for anyone giving evidence in court.
Just to be truthful
Yeah.
and honest.
Yeah.
And if you don't know it, I don't know it.
It's very hard to beat you up or explore on that if you declared that. But you would and that's you talked about the times where you're giving evidence at court and then you're getting called out at night, and the
Yeah.
courts don't care that you've been up all night.
No, I've
knee-deep
been
at a
to
crime
court many
scene.
occasions after I've been on call.
Yeah.
You go to court the next day.
Yeah, yeah.
I've even been to court in my overalls. So I didn't have time to get changed.
Yeah, well, that gives
You
you
know?
some credibility in front of the jury. Crime scene officer. Look, he's still in his overalls.
But I had a bit of reputation with some of these senior barristers.
Yeah.
They knew me and because I'm involved in a lot of cases and things.
Well,
Again, they're just another human being with a job to do. You could talk to them, be polite to them, not, disregard them or anything like that. Just
Steve,
be
I know
honest.
you're just such a nice person, but you make me feel like a bad person
No,
sitting
you're not.
opposite you. Well, with the as you said, the people that do respect your work and all that, then that came through. You made reference to what we were doing at the homicide course, and just so the listeners understand that there was there still is a homicide course that runs down at the Golden Academy where detectives come down at a certain stage in their career, and it's a specialist course on homicide. I know I was down there involved in running the course a number of times when you were down there, and you set up that cottage we had out the back of on the
Yep.
police academy, and set it up as a crime scene, and then point out interpretations of blood splatters and different things. I know because I was standing back as one of the instructors as well, but watching the participants, and they were just fascinated by you with your experience and the passion that you showed. And you said that you got a lot of joy from teaching people. I think
Yes.
that was evident down there, that you've been around 30 years, you're not disgruntled, you're not burnt out, and you've still got a passion for the job. And I think that carried a lot of credibility down there. But from the times that you've spent in crime scenes, you've got another interesting twist to your career. And when you joined the New South Wales Police, I don't believe you would have suspected that you're going to be investigating war crimes from World War II.
No.
Can you talk about that experience? Because I find that just absolutely fascinating.
If we go back a number of years, probably to the 60s or the 70s,
Yep.
information came from the Soviet Union that there were war criminals residing in Australia. And it wasn't until Bob Hawke became Prime Minister, and I think there was something on the television in relation to all these war criminals living in Australia from the Second World War, that money was put aside and they put together a special investigations unit through the Federal Attorney General's Department. And so investigators were sent overseas, and they started tracking down witnesses and gathering information and stuff like that. Then in 1990, one of our crime scene people, or forensic people, Dave Hughes, went with the team of investigators over to, I think it was called Serniki, where back then, because no other country had been allowed in to do this exhumation work, that the Russian took over and controlled the dig and things like that, and it took a long time for them to actually locate the grave and the bodies, but they eventually unearthed over 500 bodies in a mass grave, mainly all Jewish males and stuff like that. And the fact was that there was an offender residing in Australia that they were looking at. And they were gathering evidence to age the grave, looking for any ballistics material and stuff like that to take back to Australia for examination. Now, that particular person, I think, tried to commit suicide. Shot himself, but didn't die. And I don't think it went very far in the court. Now, in 1991, another team was going over there. Well, two teams were going over there. They were looking at a mass grave where I think about 15 or 16 children been taken by a village. And by Russian police officers. And disposed of.
And this was all committed during World War II.
During World War II.
In the 40s.
And there was another grave at Nevan where people were taken from a village, mainly women and old people, and shot in a grave there. So I was sort of nominated to go over as the crime scene investigator with this team. The team consisted of a forensic pathologist, a forensic odontologist.
Just explain that.
Forensic odontologist.
Both roles, so the listeners
pathologist
understand.
is someone who's going to examine the skeletal remains for identification, for bullet wounds, other injuries, also ageing of the skeletal remains, things like that. Odontologists would do exactly the same by looking at the teeth, particularly looking at children. Because back then there'd be very, very few, if no records at all, no photographs, no dental records, things like that. And we had husband and wife team, archaeologists, who would assist with the exhumation and the location of the gravesite.
So this was a team that was formed in Australia? And where were you based at to start with? Did you have...
Well, I was still working in Sydney. Out of the Sydney Police Centre. And we had two investigators. One was an ex-homicide investigator, and another was a detective from Hurstville who knew me because I worked at Hurstville. And they sort of nominated me, and so I said, "Oh, you're going overseas." I had to start preparing all the gear for it. So,
and what part of overseas is this in Russia?
Going to Russia, USSR.
So you had to take all the equipment.
So you had to look at what are we going to need. So look at all the forensic gear, cameras, video, slide film, something to recharge batteries, extension leads, paper bags, plastic bags, gloves, pens, pencils, tweezers.
You had to be self-sufficient.
A portable X-ray machine, toilet paper, food, bits and pieces. So I had packed 4 large trunks with everyone's archaeologist gear, my gear, some of the investigators' gear, which all had to go over to Moscow, and then was driven down to our first site.
So you flew over commercial airlines?
Flew over commercial airlines.
And then once you got into Moscow?
Stayed the night there, and then the next minute we're travelling, flying back down to a place called Berezavatka. And worked with the KGB.
How's that kicking?
Well, they have what they call a procurator, and he's in charge of certain areas, and where this crime particularly occurred, he was in charge of that particular area. So we worked at both locations. There was KGB.
So I bet you, as a New South Wales police officer, you didn't envisage that you were going to be working with KGB.
No, not really. No. But you know.
And how were they?
Look, they were fine. I got on really well with them because I was a police officer.
Yeah.
And look, I wore my police overalls,
Yeah.
which had New South Wales Police
Yeah.
in Sydney. So they gave me the nickname of the Eagle because of the eagle. So, but it was very difficult. You know, you got to talk through interpreters a lot of the time and things like that. So we had our own interpreter.
Yeah.
And they had their own interpreter.
Yeah.
And things like that. And look, we realised at one place we were staying out, our rooms were bugged.
Really?
Things like that.
I suppose, it's early 90s, Russia. Yeah.
And no one's ever been in that country to do this type of work.
Yeah, they would have been looking at you as a potential spy.
Well, I don't know about that. But in relation to the job they did in 1990, some of those senior people came out to Australia and were taken care of and shown around the place.
Oh,
so they had, and went back with gifts and things like that.
Yeah.
So it was different.
Yep.
Environment was different. Food was different. The first job we stayed at a hotel, but it was like 3 hours drive to the scene.
Yeah.
So rather than stay at the hotel, we went to a village, a collective farm.
Yeah.
It was about 20 minutes drive to actual site, and we stayed there on some accommodation on top of some shops.
Yeah.
No running water.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to use the ablutions or stuff like that, you'd have to go down to the well.
Yeah.
Get the water out of the well and carry the buckets up to the bathrooms and things like that.
Right.
And they were supposed to build us some showers.
Yeah.
But they hadn't been done. And we went out one day to the scene and come back that afternoon. Not only are there showers, but a pergola had been built for us as well.
Yeah.
But again, the water was out of the well, cold water for the showers and stuff like that. But eventually we decided we don't like the cold water. So on the collective farm they had showers.
Yeah.
Where all the small children and women were going first and the men were going first. And it'd have a sauna and a small pool and have your showers and you just wait and do it that way.
And so you're over there, you're in the rough conditions, or relatively rough, and then what was your task? Did you know where the grave was?
We had information that this first scene, that the grave was at the row of an end of trees.
Yeah.
But after 50 years, how long was this row of trees? And we knew there was a particular monument at the beginning, so we knew the right track to go down, and it's all agricultural area.
Yeah.
So first day we went down to the row of trees. We had a backhoe there. So the archaeologists, they dug a log trench with a backhoe, and then they looked at the dirt on each side of the trench, and they're looking for a change in colour and texture of the soil. On one side of the trench, they could see there was a colour in
So that
change.
digging the trench and looking for something.
Yeah. So we dug another trench on the other side where there was no change in colour or texture, and it was the same, nothing.
Right.
Dug another trench where we did see the changes, and it kept on going. So eventually we were able to, I think within the second day, we'd actually worked out where the grave was.
Yeah.
So.
And then started excavating
it. And at that site we had National Service soldiers helping us. And they stayed in tents on the site there.
Right.
They were dressed in like winter uniforms, and it's summertime, 36 degrees.
Yeah.
And they ended up working no shoes or boots, just their trousers, no shirts, things like that.
Yeah.
And no wheelbarrows. We had these things built out of timber where two people had to carry it. And stuff like that. But, we started digging and we found the remains of a small child at the top of the grave. And he was a boy about 12 years old. And then we kept on digging down further, and we slowly found the remains of these children that they were actually looking for, and they like little babies from about 6 months to 12-year-olds.
Examinations reveal how they'd been killed?
Oh, a lot of them had their skulls crushed and things like that.
Yeah.
And then we kept on digging more, and we found a big mass grave underneath those as children.
Yeah.
And they were adults and that. And during the digging and the excavation work, we found some artefacts. I found a lot of fired cartridge cases.
Right.
Were 7.62 millimetre.
Yeah, yeah.
Which was mainly used by the Russian police.
Yeah.
Because the Germans wouldn't give them any automatic weapons, I
Right.
believe, and things like that. So that's they used from their rifles.
Yeah.
But the information was they just used their rifle butts. And
What
smashed them through.
was it like? Like World War II and war crimes and that. What was it like for you personally, being there, coming across a grave like that?
Again, I was there to do a job.
Yeah.
I was doing all the forensic, collecting all the exhibits, labeling all the exhibits. I was doing video, still camera, and slides. And I was working with the lot with the archaeologists and the pathologists.
Yeah, yeah.
But mainly with the archaeologists.
Yeah.
Because every time something was found, you had to mark it, and photograph it, and record it, and make notes about it. Because I knew that going back to Australia,
And the purpose was it to
Thorough.
gather evidence with the view of potentially.
And you have to
prosecuting.
find artefacts to actually age that grave for that period.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of work, but
Did it look to you that they were killed in another location, or were they literally?
no, they were the way the bodies were and their remains.
They were just killed on the spot. And just in the hole.
Covered in. And the village was not that far down the road,
Yeah.
and the children were actually taken up there
Yeah.
in horse and cart.
Right.
And the fellow that took them up there was still alive and still lived in the village. You imagine at that time, imagine a lot of the males and the older teenagers had gone to the prison camps.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's mainly women and stuff in the
Right.
villages, and they're out working their fields and doing this and that, and they come back in the afternoon and their children are gone,
Yeah.
without any warning. And, were they Jews? Were they not Jews?
Yeah. And you said the bloke that took the children up on the horse and cart was still in the village.
Still lived in the
was
village.
that part of the investigation to interview him or find out?
Well, I like he was in his 90s.
Yeah.
Like this is 50 years
Yeah.
later.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So I had to gather all that evidence and that, and I wanted to do some aerial photographs of the gravesite beforehand.
Yeah.
We couldn't get a military helicopter or anything there at that particular time, so I ended up going in a crop duster.
Well, you said you wanted to be a pilot. What do you mean in a crop duster?
In a crop duster.
Yeah.
And
How'd you get your hands on a crop duster?
the investigators.
Yeah.
They made inquiries and stuff like that, and got the crop duster and the pilot for a carton of cigarettes and a bottle of scotch.
Now, I know this is a podcast and you can't really, visuals don't work, but I can imagine you hanging out the crop duster trying to take photos.
I had to, just out the window.
Yeah.
And sat beside the pilot.
Yeah.
And I got in, he got in, had his slippers on, and he was smoking. And
Slippers and smoking, as you do.
Anyway, I went to put my seatbelt on, and he said, "Don't worry about it." And then behind me in the back is a big plastic container, which obviously put the chemicals in.
Yeah.
And the KGB colonel got in the back,
Yeah.
and there was a seat there, and he had all my camera gear and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So he was sending me this camera gear through the opening as we were slowly flying around. But I noticed when we were going down the runway to take off, we were zigzagging around the place, so I just poked my head out. And because of the potholes and the runway and things like that. But anyway, so I got that done. But at the end of the job, we actually got a big military helicopter there, and it was a different. I sat in the open doorway in a harness, and going with the colonel there, handing me my camera gear, we were photographing, and rocket pods on the side, and armour plating. And,
amazing experience.
Yeah.
Amazing experience.
Were
you seconded out of the cops for that, or was that so you just did a secondment?
Secondment, special investigation, it's war crimes. So you got travelling allowance, things like that.
Yeah.
Things, it was more than what I'd ever thought of. And
did you enjoy the experience?
Oh, I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I don't drink, but I had to learn how to drink vodka.
I was going to say, without you drinking with the KGB, I reckon they'd be fairly forceful.
Oh, every night, the meal times and things like that.
You behave yourself?
Oh, yeah. But you had to learn how to drink it. And the thing was, don't mix it with any other alcohol.
Yeah.
And make sure you have something to eat, to consume.
Yeah.
And eventually it was okay. But I didn't overdo it or anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that job was eventually done, and then we went to the second job, and it was in a forest, and a little bit difficult, and a lot of rain, full of mosquitoes and stuff like that.
And what did you find on the second job?
A mass grave.
Yeah.
There eventually exhumed a mass grave, all lying sort of face down.
Yeah.
We found a small child up the top of the grave, I think a young girl. We found 2 other skeletons together, and one had a pair of galoshes on.
Right.
And the date on the sole of the galoshes was 1939.
Right. Okay.
So it was a good.
And with the bodies laying like that, do you think they were laid down and executed as they?
Yeah, it looked as though they were nearly all up one end, and they'd been shot with 9mm like a machine pistol.
Yeah.
And found a lot of cartridge cases and a few bits and pieces, stuff like that. And we also found what we thought might have been a young soldier.
Yeah.
Buried by himself in the same grave.
Right.
So, but that was getting a bit difficult to work in because of the rain.
Well,
and the
clothing, any clothing in the grave?
No.
Perished?
Well, see, they used to take clothing off them and go and sell them and things like that sometimes.
Yeah.
And, I don't think we had clothing in either site that we did.
Yeah.
And then we had to get all the stuff back to Australia. So I know the first job I gave to the investigators and they brought back, but I know the second job I had 80-something cartridge cases in my hand luggage. I thought, how are we going to get
good one to explain
through this? But there was no issue. So all those cartridge cases from the 2 jobs went to our ballistics unit, and they did an examination and analysis of it, and were able to identify where they were manufactured and when from the head stampings, which is the stampings on the.
And for all the evidence that you gathered, did we get any results through the courts? The person
well. I went to South Australia to give evidence.
Is that where they were holding the
that's
trial?
Where they were from, and that's where they were holding. So I went to South Australia. The first case that we did, another witness wouldn't come to Australia to give evidence against that particular person. So I went to court, and the magistrate dispensed with it because there was some issues with interpretation and identifying. Yeah. There was even some old lady giving evidence in the court, and they asked her to indicate who so-and-so was in the court, and she pointed to someone in the back of the court who turned out to be an American tourist.
Right.
So there was things like that.
Yeah, that's a problem with it.
And the second case that went to it went to trial. We brought a lot of witnesses out from the village for that, and during the trial he had a heart attack. So the DPP decided not to go on with it, and then Paul Keating became Prime Minister. And so there's no more money for the investigations because they were looking at another person and talking like 30,000 charges of murder. Yeah.
Well, look, even without getting results, I think crimes like that are committed, the people should be pursued until they have a heart attack. It's...
But it's very difficult because, like 50 years ago, a lot of them are deceased. They've all got different identifications, are living all around the world trying to track them down, even witnesses and the offenders and stuff like that.
It would have been a fascinating experience. It's part of history, isn't it?
It is. And being the first in, between the 2 jobs, I went to England for about 9 days, but I had to go to Scotland Yard and see their war crimes investigators and talk to them what we did and the equipment we had to take and what it was like. And then when I got back to Australia, the Royal Canadian Mounties contacted me because they were talking about sending a team in to investigate some war crimes that they were looking at. But I never heard back from either of them, so whether they did...
they followed it up.
I don't know.
No, interesting.
So
that's that was in the 90s?
91.
And then you had to come back to the real world in New South Wales?
Oh, well, I was still working, and I was still spending a lot of time, but sort of after hours, preparing all the stuff for the war crimes. Statements and photographs. And I had to do voiceover on all the video. I'm about video officer, so that took a long time to do, and things like that.
Steve Horn is the walking, talking encyclopedia of crime scene investigation. It's almost inconceivable the changes he has seen during his time as a crime scene investigator. I find it fascinating from a human perspective how he processes the death and tragedy he has seen. Even as a homicide detective, I find it hard to comprehend the things he has seen during his career. Now that you've got to know Steve, I think you'll find part 2 of the podcast fascinating, when Steve talks in detail about how forensic science plays a vital part in criminal investigations. Steve will also discuss cold cases and what he believes is the best way to approach a cold case homicide investigation and unsolved sexual assaults. He'll also talk about the most intriguing homicide crime scene he has attended during his extensive career, and even cover off on arson investigations. If you are interested in crime scene investigation, you'll be fascinated, getting an insight into how an exceptional crime scene investigator approaches crime scenes. Join us on Wednesday for part 2 of my discussion with Steve Horn, the country's most experienced crime scene officer. I Catch Killers is published by True Crime Australia, produced by Claire Harvey from the Sunday Telegraph and Dylan Adams at Made in Katana. I'm now an investigative journalist at News Corp Australia, attached to the Sunday Telegraph. If you like the podcast, please subscribe to our newspapers.